Today we're talking
Yeah.
about Steve Jobs. Um, First
Mm.
thoughts on the book, because I've read a couple of other biographies. I started with the Elon Musk one, and then I read Sheryl Sandberg and Bob Iger, the Disney one. Um, I think I've decided I prefer a biography written by the biographer, but written by the subject. So this was written by Walter Isaacson, who also wrote Einstein, Benjamin Franklin, Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, he's a brilliant biographer. But what I really liked about, especially the Bob Iger one, was you really felt like you got to know him, his personality, and his thoughts and his views on things. Where this is obviously written from a third person, it's a slightly different
Yeah.
perspective. Um, I think I mentioned this in one of the previous podcasts that Steve Jobs sought out Walter Isaacson to write his autobiography. I mean, to write his biography, but Walter Isaacson didn't for a while. I can't remember exactly what his reasoning was, but as I mentioned, he'd written previously about Einstein, Benjamin Franklin, and Leonardo da Vinci. So maybe he liked writing about people who were no longer there. And part of the reason that
Mm.
Steve Jobs reached out to him, I think, is because he felt like he identified with those types of people that Walter
Okay.
Isaacson had written about. And also he reached out to him once he'd been diagnosed with cancer. So
Mm.
he knew that he was going to die and he wanted to leave something behind. And he kept saying that he wanted Walter to write this book quite balanced. He wasn't going to check what he was writing or make him change any of the words or the stories. He was going to get a really balanced view of how people knew and understood Steve. And he wanted to leave it for his children, so that they understood maybe why he was the way he was with them, what other people thought of him, what he was doing that was so important, maybe that sometimes he wasn't available for them. So it was a really good book, but I would have really liked to have read it in Steve's words.
Yeah, there was a there's a book that was published fairly recently by I think it's available for free about Steve Jobs, and that was kind of like more his own words. Um, and I'll have to look for the name.
Yeah.
Um, I listened to the episode on Founders podcast
Mm-hmm.
where he talked about that. There was a little bit more of the personal stuff from
Yeah.
Steve Jobs and so on, and some of the emails that he sent and so on. I'm pretty sure that that featured heavily in the book as well.
Yes. So there's definitely like snippets that are Steve's own words.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't know. It was really
So
fascinating. It's interesting. He is an interesting person.
yeah, that was going to be my question to you now is having read the book, um, how have you either changed or strengthened your opinion of Steve Jobs as a person?
I mean, I'd heard that he was an asshole, and it sounds like he was an asshole. It sounds like he wasn't very nice to people. Um, but one of the things, actually, maybe it's because it's so recent that I've read Atlas Shrugged and been looking into Ayn Rand, but I feel like there's some similarities in terms of the way that he did things and the way that he worked. I mean, he's a selfish man, but not for uh, wealth and money. Like, that wasn't his goal.
Mm.
He wanted to make products that he was proud of and that people would use, and it would improve the value of their lives. Um, so he kind of did that in whatever way he knew how, which sometimes meant that people would present something to him and he would say that's shit and embarrass people and fire them on the spot. And because he had a very high standard and he wanted things to be perfect. So I would say he was a perfectionist. Um, and he knew what he liked and what he didn't like, and he always believed. They talk about his reality what was it? I can't actually remember the term that they use. But that he had this reality perception or something like that. I can't actually. I need to find it. But he kind of believed that anything was possible, and he would expect others to kind of jump on his bandwagon, and if people said something couldn't be done, he would challenge them on it, and
Mm-hmm.
most of the time it could be done, and he was right. So I mean, that's how there's such wonderful products. I'm wearing my watch, I've got my laptop in front of me, my phone next to me. I mean, the Apple products speak for themselves. So I think he was a genius and a visionary, and not always the nicest person to be around.
Yeah, I find it interesting, because if you think through history, all these great inventors or industrialists or people that made such a huge difference to um, our lives in general. Has there ever been one that everyone agreed was such a wonderful person and never argued with anybody and always allowed people to do what they want to do in the way that they want to do it?
Mm.
But I think we often forget that you know if it weren't for very stubborn people like that who knew what they wanted and insisted that things be done in a very specific way, that maybe we wouldn't have seen the progress
Yeah.
that we have. Um, I don't know if I think. I was also trying to think, um, how many of these guys do we get to experience in a generation or in a decade or
Yeah.
in a lifetime even? If you think about it, if we um, there was like at the moment it is mostly Elon Musk, um, to some extent Jeff Bezos,
Yeah.
and then before them it was Steve Jobs,
And Bill
it
Gates.
was Bill Gates, who I have varied opinions of because of his current views and where he's spending his focus and time and money.
Yeah.
Um,
But I
but
mean, that's
but
one of the things
anyway,
they talk about in the
similar
book, I think.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because
So,
they're the
so, so
same age.
similar stories.
They were both born in
Exactly. Yeah.
1955. Is that right? 1955, yeah. And yeah, they were around at the same time, and they had their competition, so that gets brought up quite a lot in the book. But yes,
Yeah.
carry on.
So if you think before them, then we start going, oh, okay, cool. So who are the guys? I don't know. Maybe we talk about guys like Einstein,
Yeah.
um, who wasn't necessarily a businessman, but you think of people like Sam Walton, um, and guys like that. And before them, you start going to the Henry Fords and the Thomas Edisons, the the Rockefellers, etc., etc. So I was thinking, wow, maybe we only experience like maximum a handful
Yeah.
per generation of people like that who leave such a phenomenal legacy or um, product or invention
Yeah.
that it's easy to criticize the person,
Yeah.
but we can't imagine our lives without what they created. And it's okay if we have to deal tolerate five assholes a generation to make a huge difference to our lives.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wonder where computing and technology would be today without Steve Jobs, because he genuinely changed the future of tech. And I mean, would someone else have done it if he hadn't? And would someone have had the ability to do what he did? Like I say, there were other people also making advancements in computing at the time. Bill Gates was one of them. But the thing that they talk about a lot in the book is that Bill Gates wanted open software, open source. Anyone can build on their software, do whatever. Steve wanted to control everything from the microchips that go into the computers to the box that they get packaged in when they get sent to customers, and everything in between. And it was a closed system. He doesn't want hackers to be able to put their own microchips in and do different. So very, very different approaches. And I mean, as I said, the products speak for themselves. They are exactly what he wanted, something simple for the everyday person to use. You can put an iPad in front of a 6-year-old who's never seen an iPad before, a computer before, and they'll figure out how to use it because it's makes sense and it's intuitive and it's what you expect it to be. So yeah, I'm very grateful that
I think
Steve
that
Jobs existed.
absolutely, and there are probably a few other names that one can also mention. Guys like Andy Grove of Intel,
Yeah, he's mentioned.
a couple of people that played a big part in that whole personal computing, smart device revolution, etc. And I think we needed all of them.
Yeah.
We needed all of them. We needed the Bill Gates single-minded visionary, closed system, etc. And we needed the Bill Gates, and then all these other players around it that contributed largely,
Yeah.
that obviously don't necessarily get all the credit or all the mentions, for their role in pulling the technology forward.
Yeah. And it's also the competition is so important. I mean, the number of times that Steve saw that Bill Gates was progressing on something that he wanted to be the pioneer in, and he would push himself further, and then Bill Gates would try and copy what he did and come up with something different. And like, you kind of need these people competing with each other in order to push everything a little bit further.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. You know, I mean, Elon Musk is a good example. In some respects, he's such a polarizing figure. You've got the diehard fans who will, cheer every venture that he tries, and then you've got these detractors and the guys who are negative and have all of these different opinions and so on. You have those that challenge him. I mean, Jeff Bezos, in terms of the space efforts,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say he's really a challenger. But the fact that there's more people trying to attempt similar things really makes a huge difference, because all of these big advancements, I don't think we always realize how much effort and how much investment and how much development and failing and starting over again, etc., happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that will be good, in my opinion, for humanity.
Yeah.
So the fact that he maybe wasn't the best boss or the best spouse
Father.
or the best father,
Yeah.
or I don't know, would we have liked if he was this model citizen and did all of these things right? yes, is there any one of us that can actually tick all those boxes and say yes to all of them?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
yeah. I I also like that he didn't try to portray an image of something that he wasn't. He never tried to make people think that he was anything other than who he was or what he was. Even when he had PR people saying to him, "Oh, you need to make sound a bit more humble in this announcement because of something that's happened," and he would be like, "Why? What's the? That's not me. I'm not a humble man. I'm not."
Yeah,
So I think that that's great that he was very aware of who he was, and um, yeah, I remember the term was reality distortion field that he had, where he
okay.
people used to mention it a lot because he would just. I mean, it happened when he was first diagnosed with cancer. He didn't want to believe that he had cancer, and so he left it very long. And maybe he
Hmm.
could have gotten it sooner and started chemo sooner and all of that. But um, yeah, it was things that he didn't want to believe existed or were possible weren't, and things that he did were, and that was just his way of doing
Yeah,
things.
and the fact that he approached the treatment of the cancer in his own specific way. I recently heard somebody say, oh well, if only he didn't go down the alternative route,
Yeah,
and you know went the conventional Western medical route, maybe he would still have been alive, etc. And we don't know.
mm-hmm.
Um, but the fact that he made up his mind about how he wanted to go about it,
Yeah,
um, and yeah, didn't succumb to all the opinions around him. It's definitely part of the reason why he was so successful.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Um, I think one of the things that you might relate to him on is he is a big lover of music, and it obviously came through when he created the iPod and the iTunes. But Bob Dylan was kind of his favorite musician, and he,
Okay,
when he was younger, he had bootleg versions of all of his albums and um, ones that he'd recorded off the radio and all those kinds of things. Um, so yeah, that was an interesting little part.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about him.
Yeah,
Especially not that he was a Bob Dylan fan.
yeah. It was his
Mm,
favorite artist. And he also dated
wow.
Joan Baez. Boaz? Boaz?
Yeah.
Yeah. He and her dated for a while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, I was trying to think what else. Oh, so one of
You
the.
mentioned
Yeah.
you mentioned that there's a quote
Yeah.
that you wanted to read.
There's actually two. The one is from that advert, the here's to the
Yep.
rebels. That advert, I think, is it's just very poignant. And um, there was a version, this came out in the book, of that advert that was recorded by Steve himself, not by the voiceover they eventually went with. Um, and they had wanted to use that one in the ad, the voice of Steve. And he had said he didn't want it to be about him. It's not about him, it's about Apple, it's about the
Yeah.
business, it's about the products. And so he ended up refusing to use that version in the ads because he didn't want people to think it was all about him. Um, and then at his funeral, apparently, they fished out that recording and they had his voice play um, the quote, which they said was a really interesting, stunning moment of hearing it
I
in
wonder if
Steve's words.
yeah. I
I'm
wonder
sh-
if that's available on
yeah, I was thinking
YouTube
that
or
as well. I haven't looked yet, but I'm pretty sure I can find it. But I might just very quickly read that one because I think it speaks to who he is. He had a
mm,
part in writing this. It was their manifesto for one of their ads, and he had put in his own line, um, which apparently when he reads it, which I like I say I haven't heard it yet, but when he reads it, apparently he it says he had conjured up. Where is it now? At that point, his voice became slightly more emphatic, excited, as if he was sitting right in front of the crowd, his eyes again ablaze. It conjured up memories of what he sounded like when he was young, and how, as in his favorite Dylan song, he had remained forever young. And the line is, "They push the human race forward." So when I get there, you'll hear it. But
Okay.
I just thought that was pretty cool. So the words from the advert are: "Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of the rules and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do." I think that's really nice.
Yeah.
That kind of sums up Steve Jobs. And then this is a little section that's in his own words. So he got asked what drove, what was his driver, what were his drivers, what drove him. So he says, "What drove me? I think most creative people want to express appreciation for being able to take advantage of the work that's been done by others before us. I didn't invent the language or mathematics I use. I make little of my own food, none of my own clothes. Everything I do depends on other members of our species and the shoulders that we stand on. And a lot of us want to contribute something back to our species and to add something to the flow. It's about trying to express something in the only way that most of us know how. Because we can't write Bob Dylan songs or Tom Stoppard plays. We try to use the talents we do have to express our deep feelings, to show our appreciation of all the contributions that came before us, and to add something to that flow. That's what has driven me."
Mm.
I like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Something that I've been thinking about quite a bit in the last few days is this concept of the givers and the takers. Just again, as I see some events unfold around the world, and there seems to be a much larger number of takers. People who just insist that they are owed X, Y, and Z. That is whether you are looking at it from a point of view of employees towards their employer, citizens to their government, kind of all across that spectrum. And I don't know what to make of it yet. I don't know why it is like that. I don't know enough about the subject to be able to say, oh, it's a Western thing, or it's a, gen whatever thing. But it is something that has been playing on my mind, and I've been thinking about quite a lot. And in terms of that passage that you read now, is to get an individual to think like that, and I don't know, to be driven to make a particular contribution.
Yeah.
I think we often fall into the trap of, well, if you're not Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Henry Ford or Thomas Edison, then your contribution is not worth that much. But I think that we all have the ability to contribute, and I was going to say that we all have the skills to do that, but that's not true. That's definitely not true, because there are a lot of people who actually refuse to acquire the skills to do anything meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because I think most people have the ability to acquire the skills. But because it requires effort, results are not guaranteed, we kind of sit in the comfort of our uncomfortable position
Yeah.
and point fingers.
So,
And
yeah. I was just
yeah,
going
just to finish that point is that I think that is why it's so refreshing when you have people like a Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and a Bill Gates, etc., with that drive and with that vision and with that screw you type attitude,
yeah.
just forging ahead
Pushing the
and
human
getting it
race
done.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think maybe something that, okay, I can't speak for all people. For myself, one of the things that I've struggled with is kind of figuring out what I can contribute or what I am capable of contributing or how my contribution is making a difference uh, to the human race.
Well, I don't think it's something that is thought out beforehand. Certainly, when Steve Jobs started, he didn't envision the iPhone or the iWatch or whatever other products they are available. But he had a very specific focus, and I think the same with the rest of us. Sure, we're not going to start computer companies or technology companies or fly rockets to Mars or whatever. Um, and it is only the select few that are destined to do things like that. But also, we don't need 2 billion people flying rockets to Mars. So, in terms of our contribution and significance to society, whether that is, I don't know, writing a poem, a blog post, an essay, or whatever that touches, I don't know, 2 people, 5 people, 10,000 people. Are we not over engineering this and saying that my contribution is not significant because it's not on a global scale?
And what about more practically in terms of something like government taxes? So if you're a working person, is that not also a contribution to society?
No, that is absolutely the opposite of that. That is like, no, I'm being serious. I'm being serious. Um, tax is not an tax. Paying tax is not a given. Paying tax is not a necessity. Paying tax is never. Do you know that in the United States in 1913, personal income tax was introduced for the first time as a temporary measure? I can't remember the date it was first implemented in some other countries, but it was kind of like a similar story. So, unfortunately, taxes, it is like paying protection money to the mob. That's all it is. Well, with a mob, you can actually move to a different country or to a different town or with the government, you can't escape them. They will literally send men with guns
Yeah.
to your house if you do not pay your tax. So, so, so paying tax should never be seen as a good deed.
Do you think
I
that's
know we all have to.
Do you think that's a worldwide view, or do you think specifically in South Africa or in specific places?
No, no, no. That is definitely should be a worldwide view. There are a lot of people that hold that view all across the world. So it's not a listen, my government is corrupt kind of thing. I mean, there are a few places in the world where people don't pay income tax. Um, and the societies are not worse off than other places in the world. Um, do you know where the saying daylight robbery comes from?
No.
It's a wonderful book written by Dominic. Oh, I'm going to have to find it quickly. Dominic Frisby. He's actually an English artist, a British artist that got into journalism and eventually wrote a couple of books. The book is called, sorry, I have to find this. Dominic Frisby, Daylight Robbery. The book is called Daylight Robbery. So the phrase daylight robbery comes from during the time, and I forget the time frames, where people in the UK were taxed on the number of windows they had in their houses. So, because they ran out of bullshit things to tax the population with, and they wanted to, they needed money to support their habits, like a drug dealer or a drug addict rather. You know, so for example, there was a time in, I think in the 1800s somewhere, where in Russia there was a beard tax. You paid tax depending on how long your beard was, and obviously it was very fashionable to have a long full beard. So if you wanted to grow that beard, you paid more tax. But anyway, so they started introducing, they ran out of ways to tax people in the UK. So they came up with, well, these windows. So people, in order to avoid the tax, they started bricking up their windows. So when you walk through a little village there, pay attention to some of those buildings, I mean, we've all wondered, why the hell did they put these small little windows into these places, Why are they bricked up?
Yeah.
The second and third order consequences of that was obviously horrific. They didn't think about that and so on. This is by taking away the daylight. I mean, there are health issues, etc., etc. Anyway, so I learned that from Dominic Frisby's book. So that is unfortunately what has happened with taxes, and we see it. There is now, even beyond a local or national government, we are looking at these global type of taxes. For example, the ESG movement, diversity, equity, and inclusion is nothing other than a tax. The entire ESG movement is nothing other than a form of taxation. There's like a universal 15% company tax that have been doing the rounds by the European Union, World Economic Forum, etc., etc. And it's, despite all the taxes that are being implemented and collected, there's not a government that I'm aware of that is not deep in debt.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I wanted to ask. Do you think all tax, not just income tax, all tax is bad? And if so, then how should governments or countries be making money?
Why does the government
To do
have to money?
to do things like maintain roads or
Why does government have to do that?
so if government's not doing it, whose responsibility would it be to do it?
Some Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Elon Musk or some
But then,
private
but who
contractor.
would pay a private contractor to do it? Because it's not like no one's going to say, "Oh, that's my piece of road."
So, so I think on a municipal or county or provincial level,
Mm,
um, I think that there is a contribution to make to certain central services if they are not privatized.
mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, I mean, again, you know, don't you? Isn't it a common thing to hear at the moment in the UK that not enough is spent on infrastructure and maintenance and et cetera, et cetera. I see that all the time in the
Yeah.
US, complaints about that,
I mean, I have my own feelings about this, but because of in the ways that it affects me personally. But one of the things now is obviously there's been a lot of striking in the UK by public sector workers, school teachers, nurses, transport workers, um, and they've just been offered a 6 to 7 or 6 to 8% raise in pay that the government can't afford, but it is recouping those costs from poor people like me who have immigrated to this country, and our immigration fees have now gone up exponentially in order to cover the costs of all these public sector workers. It's the best way that they could see to raise the extra funds that they need to pay these people. So I'm obviously a bit affected because it's, I'm afflicted because it affects me, but I understand that these people do need to be compensated for their services, and those are public services. So then,
know?
if there aren't taxes, then where's that money coming from?
Well, here's another common thing that you hear these days is how bad the education system is. Pick a country. I'm sure that there's a couple which will say that they're quite happy with the public education system. Government has no business educating anybody. I mean, why is that a government responsibility? Why is healthcare? The NHS is a bankrupt. Any private business with financial statements like that would have been bankrupt a long time ago. And yet, even if you don't use it for 10 years, you are contributing to it. And there are so many people looking from the outside in going, well, if only we were allowed and we could run this privately, we can do it a hell of a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what, if there are no entrepreneurs involved, if there's no incentive to run it well, then it is going to just grow in size
Yeah.
And stagnate. There's no incentive
Yeah.
for real innovation.
This is a huge topic. I feel like we need to move this to another podcast talking about taxes and governments and public and private, because I really want to talk about this more. I think this is fascinating, and I want to know, where do you draw the line, and what things do you privatize and what things do you nationalize, and how do you manage the things that are nationalized, and how do you get income for the things that are nationalized. And I think that we need to have a podcast about this, because
Excellent.
we've opened a can of worms
Correct.
here.
So yeah, just to bring it back to
Yeah,
today's topic
yeah,
is what if in the 1970s the US government decided that private entrepreneurship in technology would not be allowed. It should be nationalized. It should become the domain of the government. Do you think we would have had iPhones and all the other things that we have at the moment?
I mean, Atlas shrugged. I think we would have all the geniuses going to find a cave in the mountains and start their own community and
Exactly.
yeah,
So definitely bringing it back to to the genius and the rewards that are there. And again, I'm not talking about the monetary rewards, etc. But you just earlier read or spoke about what motivated Steve Jobs,
yeah,
and it was never another zero or another yacht or another island or
yeah,
whatever, etc. It was about the technology and about how well this thing functioned, etc., etc. That's what drove and motivated it. The the money that came in helped a hell of a lot
yeah,
to get more people involved, to pay people well, to go and find the best talent to come and work
yeah,
on this. And if it wasn't for good old fashioned capitalism, there would not have been that incentive. It's it's blown out of proportion that this is about one person at the top making all the money. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of millionaires created through that.
mm-hmm.
Just within Apple over the last 20, 30 years, literally thousands of millionaires were created through that.
Yeah. One other little anecdote of Steve Jobs when he came back to Apple after he had been fired, when he returned
Mm-hmm.
as interim CEO, he didn't want to be the CEO. He was just helping them out. He wouldn't accept a salary. He accepted $1 a year as the
Yeah.
CEO of Apple, um,
Mm.
and he definitely wasn't in it for the money. He wanted to create something that would last for eternity and that would leave an impression on the world and that would push the human race forward. That was his incentive. That's what he wanted.
That's quite a popular strategy. I think Elon Musk also at some point, or Mark Zuckerberg, one of them, also only took $1 salary. It could have been the Google boys. It could have been Larry and Sergey as well. Maybe all of them, because there is that thing about, okay, cool. I'm willing to back myself in terms of what I'm going to achieve here. So rather give me shares. There definitely some tax advantages to that
Yeah,
strategy as well.
yeah,
But it does speak volumes. It does speak volumes in terms of that delayed gratification, in terms of, you know what, I back myself. I will collect my reward at the end of this if I deliver and if
exactly.
I achieve what I want to achieve,
Yeah,
as opposed to, well, if I'm going to be the CEO, I'm going to need this big fat salary and all these other perks, etc., etc.
yeah.
Fascinating. So we're going to talk about taxes
Nationalization,
and
privatization, and
the
governments.
role the role of government. Excellent.
That's
I'm
gonna
looking
be a
forward
that's
to
gonna
that.
be a fun one.
Yeah,
Cool.
fantastic.
Thank you very much. It's been great chatting.
Thanks, Ali.
Cheers.
Cheers.